Yo, 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 yo. What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another exciting adventure here at Allan's Anatomy, where we learn. Can you guess it now? Anatomy? Today I got quite a few bones for y'all. It's not going to be that long of a video, but I have the occipital bone here, the palatine bone or palatine bone, however you guys want to say it, the maxilla right here, inferior nasal concha right here, the nasal bone, you can see, and the small lacrimal bone right here. To focus it, there we go. And today, what I'm gonna do first is start off with the occipital bone because I feel like this one's pretty not difficult to learn. The first thing you really want to do is be able to distinguish the internal versus external surface. So I don't know where my little that little skull bone thing I had, I don't know where it went. So I'm just gonna teach without it. But so this it sits. So this is like the back of your head sitting. So this is your external surface in the back, and the more little concave inside part is your internal surface. And so the very first objective that you see on your list is called the internal occipital protuberance. And that's going to be where you see this little plastic piece here is. So it's like right here in this area where you see all these lines coming from. So this is your internal occipital protuberance right here. Your next objective is your clivus. So what you want to do from there is go down until you reach this giant hole, and then you're gonna see this like almost like a little landslide area here. All of this. So this is called your clivus or clivus. A lot of people like to say it, but either or, this is your clivus. I like to say clivus. I don't know. I'm trying to do all the internal stuff first before I flip to the back. So let me look at all the objectives right quick. And one thing you may notice if you scroll down a little bit, you see things like sulcus for the inferior petrosal sinus. You see things like grooves for transverse sinus, groove for sigmoid sinus. So basically, with those objectives, you're gonna need multiple bones in order to see those grooves like fully. So what you want to do is get a skull bone. Take off the top part, top round piece, and then look around the area of the occipital bone. So you've probably already seen it, like those grooves where those sinuses go. They pretty much run like where these lines are running from. So you probably have seen it, but if you're in lab and I'm in lab, then we can take a look at it. Um, so pretty much that's most of the objectives that are on the inside part. A majority of objectives that you're gonna see are actually on the outer surface. So let's start off with that. I don't know if you guys can see this pretty well, but you see these little like eyebrows. They look like eyebrows, low key. But you see that they're meeting up at a specific point, like here. So this is your external occipital protuberance. So right here in this area. And so you're gonna have things coming off of it. So one of those things here, those little eyebrows that we saw earlier, are your superior nuchal lines. And then right below, I don't know if it's really visible that well. So here's superior, and right below, like here, are your inferior nuchal lines, right there, going on either sides. And you might can see this better in person in this video. I got an Android, so I'm sorry. I'm sorry. um, your next objective is called your condyles. So here are your condyles right here. These large little club-looking pieces, kind of like how we talked about the condylar process on the mandible. So they look like clubs. So here are your condyles. Then you have what's called a condylar canal. So basically, if you kind of flip, so if it sits like this, and this is more rostral, the top part going down. So your condyles are here. Going more rostral to your condyles is this little area here. Little area on either sides. So this is your condylar canal right here on either sides. Right there. We did the nuchal lines. We did the external occipital protuberance. Hypoglossal canal, very important. So if you go more, I guess, caudal in nature or inferior in nature, down below your condyles, you're gonna see this hole here. As you can see, can y'all see that hole there? And what's cool about this compared to your condylar canal, you can, well, with the disarticulated bones, you can actually place something through it. So it's the only thing you can place through on this bone piece. And so this is your hypoglossal canal, where your hypoglossal nerve courses through. Um, then we have what's called the pharyngeal tubercle. So just imagine the clivus area here. So the clivus, but flip it to the external surface. So on the back here. And if you can see this little bump right here, you might can see it better in lab, but it's like a little bump. So this is your pharyngeal tubercle right there. Tubercle is just like protuberance, just like this little bump region here. Pharyngeal tubercle right there. And then your external occipital crest. So this hole that I haven't mentioned yet is called your foramen magnum. Pretty easy to remember, foramen magnum. Very important because your spinal cord courses through here. And so if you go more superiorly from that, so here going up, I don't know if you guys can you guys see this like line here? So that's called your external occipital crest. That little line there going all the way up from foramen magnum. And those are the objectives for the occipital bone. One thing else that you guys might want to remember is so your external occipital protuberance. So this part right here. So it has an AKA for it. So the AKA is basically called an inion, INION. Fact check me on that, but it's just the AKA. So you might see it later on in the objectives list, but just to make sure you know it, that's what it is. So we're done with the occipital bone. Next thing I'm gonna do is the simple bone right here. Give you guys a little break, and this is your nasal bone. I really wish I had my skull so I could show you how it sits in the skull, but here's your nasal bone. And a lot of people get this confused with like lacrimal, but basically, I don't know for what reason, whatever. The nasal bone to me looks like a little ghost. So take that how you will. Like a lot of people say ghost, it kind of looks like a squid to a lot of people. Squid games, but I don't know. It just looks like a ghost to me. So if you ever see something shaped like this, it's the nasal bone. And then you have the inferior nasal concha right here. And so basically how this sits in your skull, you might have already seen like a cross section of it before. Let's see. So basically, this is your maxillary bone. So if you peer inside somebody's nose, you're gonna see this inferior nasal concha right here. And there's a good like radiograph or yeah, it's a good radiograph of it. Yeah, I think we did on a mock for you guys, but here's how it sits like that. And it looks like a chewed up piece of gum, basically, in a way. And we know that the superior and middle nasal concha, those are associated with the ethmoid bone. So with the inferior nasal concha, it's just a bone by itself. So you don't have to say inferior nasal concha of the inferior nasal bone. You don't have to say any of that. The next up bone that I have for y'all is called the palatine bone, right here. So this bone, it's not too bad. I'm gonna show you guys how it sits in relation to the maxilla. So if you can just imagine this. So it sits like this. So if I'm looking at a skull and I see like the nostril area and I go a little bit further back, this is how it's gonna be sitting like this. Like that. And so I'm going to take it out because we're going to talk about the disarticulated part right now. And so it has a bunch of different parts to it, but it's not too hard to learn. And so once you're looking at it, I'm gonna turn it sideways like this. So if you see this wall here going vertical, so this is my perpendicular plate of my palatine bone right here. So this is my perpendicular plate. And this line here, this structure here going horizontal, this is my horizontal plate. And what you're going to notice is you want to be able to distinguish palatine bone from the anterior versus posterior. So how I, remember that. So you see this thing in the back, this part here in the back. So this is what I call my little dump truck. So, dump truck's in the back. So I always, can orientate myself good. So this is in the back, and the scientific name for it is called your pyramidal process. So this is it. The dump truck, your pyramidal process is in the back. And so going back to the horizontal plate here, so this is going more toward like the midline, like toward like the septum, nasal septum. So you have a little point at the very end of this, like this point right here where I'm holding this nail. So that point at the very back, is called my posterior nasal spine. So it's that point at the very back, right there. And all of this leading up to it, so from here all the way to that point, is what I call my nasal crest. So you have nasal crest here, all the way here, and at the very end of it, that very tip point, is my posterior nasal spine. And we're gonna get to the anterior nasal spine later on in this video. And a few other objectives that we have. So you see this little structure here, just leading up to the top right here, going all the way up to the top. So this is going to be associated with your orbit. So this is what's called my orbital process of my palatine bone right here. All this structure here going up toward like the orbit of my eye. And the way I kind of remember it is, I know this is not the correct structure name for it, like this little hole, it's foramen. But if you can see this little foramen, it kind of reminds me of like the orbit of the eye. So I always get that associated with the orbital process. Next up we have on our list. So what you want to do with these next two is flip the palatine, kind of to the bottom, to the base of it. And what you're going to see are three holes. You're going to see this large giant hole right there. You're going to see two, I don't know if you guys can see them. Let me see if I can, these two holes right there, another one right there. So the large giant hole, this giant big one right there that you can see through to the other side, that's called my greater palatine foramen. And you're going to have a bunch of nerves coursing through it. And you might have already talked about them in lecture. And then you have these two smaller holes back here, 1 and 2. Those are my lesser palatine foramen. So you have two of those, and you have one greater palatine foramen. And then the nerves that are going to be coming through those are going to be associated with like your hard and soft palate. So the greater is going to be dealing with the hard palate, and then the lesser is going to be dealing with like your soft palate. The nerves that come through those. Let's see what else y'all have on y'all's list right quick. Did that. And I think that's it. Yeah, that's palatine bone. And like I said earlier, you want to know how it's associated with the actual skull bones, like the other skull bones. So in this case, the maxilla. So it sits like that. Like that. And I don't know if you guys, it's not listed here. Oh, it is. Never mind. There's one more. The maxillary process. So that one, you see this little point here that's extending toward the maxillary bone. So this point here. So that's going to be my maxillary process of my palatine bone. And those are the objectives for palatine. Pretty simple and easy, right? Not too bad. You guys going to master this easily for your final. The next thing I want to do is the lacrimal bone. I just want to briefly talk about this one, because with a lot of bones, especially this lacrimal bone here, it's not the best looking thing in the world. And so what you want to do, at least how I learned it, is look at a skull bone to identify some of the objectives. And I wish I had my skull to show y'all, but if you see me in lab, just be like, hey, can you show me this? But it looks like a potato. So if you get a potato and you get a ghost and you're trying to figure out what's what, just know that the nasal bone, let me try to focus one at a time. Nasal bone looks like a ghost / squid. And the lacrimal bone here, come on, focus. There we go. Wait. Oh, where? The lacrimal bone looks like a little potato for some reason to my eyes. But like I said, see me in lab if you guys want to go over some of those objectives, but they're not too bad. The next major bone I want you guys to learn is the maxilla bone. And with this one, it's honestly the most simple thing. Like, there's not much you can mess up with this. So it sits like this, or is orientated like this. So you can just imagine if I had another one, it'd comprise like the facial region of my skull. So basically, just like we did with the mandible, with the teeth at least, you have these structures here, right here, all encasing the teeth all around. So these are my alveolar process. And since we have two alveolar process, this is why stating what bone they're coming from is so important. So these are my alveolar processes of my maxilla right here. This little part here that's extending upward. So you can just imagine your frontal bone sits like up here because it's making up the rest of your orbit at the top. So this projection that's extending up toward that frontal bone is my frontal process, like so. And then you have this region over here. So this region is where, the side of my face would be. So like the curve, that arch. So the zygomatic arch would be over here. It's the zygomatic bone. So this part here that's extending toward the bone is my zygomatic process. Oh, my camera. No. All right. Had a little mishap right there. And so you see this little hole here, it's a foramen right there. I'm sticking this nail through. So this, my orbit is here and it's below the orbit. So this is my infraorbital foramen right there. Right there. And we did the supraorbital foramen. And we did that on the frontal bone. But this is my infraorbital foramen. Let's see what else is on y'all's list. At the very tip, at the front of like the nasal area, kind of like how we did on the palatine bone, but this is more anteriorly now associated. At the very tip in the front, this is what's called my anterior nasal spine. So the very tip of it. I'm trying to get it like good, but yeah, there you can see it now. Pretty good there. The very tip of it. It's my anterior nasal spine. What else? What else y'all got on here? If you kind of look at it more, flip it down a little bit, look at the orbit a little bit more, what you're going to see is this little like depression or groove kind of leading into this little hole right there. So this little, I guess, groove, as some people would say, this is called my infraorbital groove right here. Right there. And it's going to lead to the infraorbital foramen. And you might have seen like the giant little, I guess, eye model. It has like a good picture of like the nerve going through, coursing through the infraorbital foramen. So if you want a good picture of that, you should look at that. So we did that. So palatine process. So like I was talking about earlier, how the palatine sits on maxilla. So this region here that's coursing back toward the palatine bone right here, coursing all the way back. So this is my palatine process, and it's extending toward the palatine bone. So palatine process right here, this region here, extending toward palatine bone. Let's see what else. And then you have like the intermaxillary suture. So, like I said earlier, if you could just imagine you have another maxilla bone here, the region that separates them, the little suture that separates them, is that intermaxillary suture that you're going to see. And it's for this next objective as well. If we flip the maxilla to the bottom, as you can see here, this little groove here. If I had two, you can see it really perfectly. But this is pretty much my, they got it listed here. It's like the incisive fossa or canal, basically. So here, it's more like a fossa if you have like one bone. But if you put two bones together, it makes like a perfect canal, basically. And then we have like my nasolacrimal groove. So this is where like your tears come through. So we have it facing normal anteriorly. We'll flip it towards the side. And then you see this little part here where my nail is like coursing through. So this is like my nasolacrimal canal, basically. Things like that. And what you're going to see on this side, at least, on the lateral side, is this little ridge here. So this is my anterior lacrimal crest. This little ridge. I'm trying to get it like focused really good. So here. Like that. And that's it for the maxillary bone, or maxilla, I should say. Um, so pretty much all of those bones that we did today, they're not too bad. Pretty simple. The next video I'm gonna produce is just gonna be the temporal bone by itself, because that bone has a lot of structures on it, a lot of little tiny itty bitty structures on it. But thank you guys for watching this video, and I'll see y'all in the next one, baby.